nuclear umbrella, India-Pakistan narrative, and what is called the concept of a limited conflict, including the question of how limited any conflict can be. So we have Hasnain, who is a thinker among generals, and we have Chris Fair, who is a fighter among thinkers. So if you don't know what I mean, I think you should go on her Twitter timeline and see the causes that he fights for. So we have three concepts intertwined in this topic that we will unpack over the next 30 minutes. So one is the idea of limited conflict itself, and then there is an idea of a nuclear umbrella under which this limited conflicts are taking shape, and then both actually feeding to an India-Pakistan narrative, which is at least a century old. Some people would say it is 1200 years old. If you've been following the contemporary political debate, 1200 years of conflict. We'll come back to that in a while. But my first question I will ask you both in an international context. You would all, both of you would remember the Trump versus Kim exchange, public exchange on Twitter about my button versus your button, the nuclear button. So which one is bigger and which one is more effective? So that may be a little for the public consumption. And
but we know from Stormy Daniels the answer to the question.
There you go. I let it pass. Yes. And there we also have a more considered official US proposal which came out in the form of the Nuclear Posture Review of 2018, which actually brought down the threshold of a US nuclear strike considerably, and also introduced the concept of tactical nuclear weapons that we in the subcontinent are talking about and concerned about, including in the US context. So my question therefore is, both of you, are we lowering the threshold for a nuclear war globally? And is a proliferation, vertical proliferation happening as we speak because of hypernationalism in several countries that are declared nuclear powers? And are we actually, from the direction of nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament, are we traveling in the opposite direction because of hypernationalism internationally before we come to South Asia?
In the context of both countries?
And generally speaking, now it is talking about the NPI US nuclear posture as well. Yes. We'll come back to the India subcontinental question subject. These are international, globally speaking.
So I don't see this as being driven by nationalism. This is just a classic security dilemma, right? So in the case of South Asia, India's long-term competitor is China. China's long-term competitor is the United States, and Pakistan's competitor is India. So what you just have is this spiral, and this thing, the security dilemma essentially involves things that countries do to enhance their own security. In other words, things that are defensive are almost always read as offensive by the adversary. And so this nuclear spiral that we've been in, or the security dilemma, predates some of the other issues that you're talking about. And so I think without question, because the fundamental security issues between states, and because it involves security dilemmas that involve multiple states, it's very difficult to get to a world where non-proliferation is real, right? And for a variety of reasons, the nuclear regime will loosen. For some countries, it will try to tighten for others, but over the long-term horizon, I think we're going to see more nuclear powers.
What's your view, General? Is a threshold of a nuclear war lower than it was, say, 15 years ago?
First of all, I clarify for the audience. There is no such thing as nuclear war fighting. Nuclear weapons are weapons of deterrence. This is the original doctrine right from the moment nuclear weapons were developed. What you're seeing today in the last 15 years particularly is increasing use of nuclear weapons, nuclear capability for psychological warfare. What I personally feel, the way I analyze the situation, even between the United States and North Korea, was who can maximize his gains from it. I would never have expected North Korea to be crazy enough to be able to launch missiles at the United States, because they know there's a thing called MAD, mutually assured destruction. And in the case of the US-North Korea equation, North Korea would always suffer. You would come to the Indian subcontinent. Imran Khan knows very well that he will never pull that nuclear trigger. Because if he does, there are as many nukes sitting in the hands of India. And India is a much larger country to be able to absorb a first strike and be capable of launching a second strike. But he will continue talking about it. And for the first time you found in India, someone talking about it in form of a sheer mention. And that was Mr. Rajnath Singh, who said, we may just change our look at review of our first strike option. That was a typical case of psychological warfare. We need to do more of it. We need to continue doing it. But I don't think the human race has come to a stage where they will actually look at pressing the nuclear button.
Okay, so we will come back to the question of how pandering to public sentiments as a psy-war, a psychological warfare, how it might actually lead to, we'll come back towards our last 5 minutes perhaps. But I will, now that you mentioned Imran Khan, we will recall what he's told the UN General Assembly. There is always a danger of another Pulwama. They might come and bomb us again and another cycle may start. When a nuclear armed country fights till the end, it will have consequences far beyond the borders. So the question therefore is, when does and how does a limited conflict ceases to be limited?
I mean, so this is the crux of the nuclear issue here in South Asia, right? And you and I, we've been on countless panels. I think we see eye to eye on this. They're not weapons that can actually be used for war fighting, right? So Pakistan has a dilemma, right? And oh, by the way, it's not Imran Khan, in my view, who does the trigger pulling, right? He is really just the puppet of the army, right? We're really talking about the army's calculus, not his, and that's good, because probably the army is more thoughtful than he is, although his wife does keep 2 gins, so who knows. So Pakistan is a dilemma, right? Ideologically, it is a revisionist state, and by the way, their revisionism just doesn't end with Kashmir. So we can debate, how do you make a revisionist state? No longer revisionist, but that's longer than we have time here. So if Pakistan's committed to revisionism, and I submit to you, it is for a variety of reasons pertaining to the army, it has a dilemma. Right? It has an army that can start wars but not win them, and it has nuclear weapons that it cannot, strictly speaking, use. So what Pakistan has pioneered, and by the way, they've been doing this long before 1998, right? We see Pakistan pioneering this notion of offensive proxy war going back to the 1950s. We see it in their defense literature. And by the time we get to the late 1970s, when Pakistan is actively under Zulfikar Ali Bhutto talking about a nuclear weapon and Islamic bomb, we see this idea emerging that under the nuclear umbrella, Pakistan can engage in these kinds of proxy wars with increasing impunity, right? And that's what, when we talk about...
Yes, we'll come back to the nuclear umbrella and the nuclear umbrella and the proxy war. Let me go back to General.
The same question.
Same question.
How limited can limited wars be?
How limited can be limited?
Very good question.
I'll add just an extra additional point to that. Do you think the next Pulwama and the next Balakot is only a matter of time?
Very interesting question. How limited are limited wars? Just remember, this is the season, this is the period, the stage of what is called hybrid war. There is no such thing as a conventional war today. The last real conventional war was fought with, say, 2003. When the second Gulf War was fought, which was really also not conventional because it was a completely asymmetric situation. To think of wars between 2 nations armed to the teeth, going at each other with all the conventional weapons, I can't think of it. Pakistan is confident that under the shadow of nuclear weapons, they can continue playing limited war in combination with many other aspects of hybrid warfare, which is psychological, ideological, financial, terrorism, everything can be there. And have created a kind of a specter in the minds of India that should you respond, then Pakistan will respond first with tactical nuclear weapons, and if necessary, with all other nuclear weapons. Now, I think there's still a tremendous amount of space between the limit, the threshold of nuclear war and the limited war. You found what happened with Pulwama, you found what happened with surgical strikes, you found what happened with Pulwama. There are many more situations on the escalatory ladder which we may not even be able to imagine today. a limited war in Kashmir, a limited war only in the valley, a valley-based line of control, a limited war all over Jammu and Kashmir, a series of surgical strikes repeatedly. I mean, it's your imagination based upon your capability.
So
but I do think that limited war still has pace.
So could I come in there, General? So do you think Pakistan's nuclear bluff has been called with the Uri and Balakot? As some people have argued, come to you also argue.
Very frankly saying, I don't think the Uri situation and the surgical strikes, the situation after Pulwama, the Balakot strikes, were at a stage of escalation where Pakistan would ever think of using nuclear weapons as such. But definitely Pakistan's threat of the use of nuclear weapons has been called as a bluff, because we went in, we crossed the line of control, we went in and did what we had to do, and perhaps the next time we'll do much more. There is enough scope, let me tell you, to go across the line of control and do many more things, which I may not be in the liberty to discuss at the moment.
So the limited war itself, limited conflict itself has a broad range, right?
Yes,
Wide range.
yes.
Okay, Chris, you have, let me frame this question, the same
Well,
question.
no, okay.
Same question, let me frame it. You have used the term nuclearized jihad to describe Pakistan's behavior of using a nuclear umbrella and then using this relentless jihadi attacks on India, the bleeding by thousand cuts, etc. So do you think that is that has been challenged definitively because of India's changed posture?
See, this is the problem that you have to understand. If you're an American and you were watching this exchange, Pakistan actually pulled a defeat out of the jaws of victory. And it may be very difficult for someone sitting here to understand how this happens. For one thing, many of the Indian claims that were made were, how should we put this delicately, empirically questionable. The only folks that actually know the answer will actually be the Pakistanis. So in some strange way, Pakistan probably did not feel as punished as many Indians think they may have been.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it, I think, had to do with the claim that an F-16 was shot down, and only certain Indians are of this belief. No international analyst who's looked at satellite data will confirm this. So if you're Pakistani, what you actually saw was a roadmap to de-escalation that primarily resided on both sides on deception. And this is the sort of thing that has analysts like me very concerned. So for example, if India didn't have the canard of an F-16 shoot down as its excuse to formally de-escalate, and of course Pakistan had the pilot, that was the excuse to de-escalate, what would have we seen in this conflict dynamic? And the other thing that's very difficult from an analytical point of view is that when you have publics that are being told by their government that they have a capability that they may or may not possess, especially on the democratic end, you will have demands for things that are not possible. And I would argue that Modi's biggest competitor in the Balakot strike was actually the Modi that we saw in the movie Uri.
Right. We will come to that point. We will come to that point. But at what step in that on the escalation ladder will the US say that we have an interest to protect here? You first.
Well, actually, what's interesting is from a game theoretic point of view, President Trump's incompetence creates a lot of opportunities for research questions. So it just so happens that this escalation happened while he was, surprise, surprise, on a golf course, right? And I wish I were joking, but I'm not. So a more traditional US president, as soon as Pulwama happened, we would have seen closure at the National Security Council, we would have seen scenarios, we would have seen plans, what are we going to do under the following circumstances? And we didn't see that with this president for reasons I think are fairly obvious and well known. So what I find fascinating about President Trump is that he creates a lot of uncertainty for what the Pakistanis may expect. So with a more traditional president, we may have seen more assertive and forceful.
So we have a lot of ground to cover, so let us move a little quickly. So we talked, Chris spoke about the narrative, how an incident is portrayed and projected for public consumption, particularly when you are in a democratic country. So I'll slightly go off that point and ask you, how is the Kargil conflict viewed by Pakistan? And Pakistan, how is Pakistan projecting Kargil conflict to its own population?
Firstly, why should we even start with Kargil? Let's start with Siachen.
Right.
How are they portraying Siachen to their own public? They never ever admitted to the media, Pakistani media or the Pakistani public, that they lost Siachen to the Indian Army in 1984 and that they have not been able to regain it till 2019. And the Pakistani generals I meet tell me that they have been in Siachen, they have served in Siachen. And I love to tell them, you cannot even see Siachen. You cannot even see Siachen because Siachen is only with India. And we are sitting on the Saltoro Ridge, by which it blocks the complete view of Siachen. I just want to make a point here for the audience. Just remember that any mutual withdrawal from Siachen will mean only the withdrawal of one army, and that's the Indian Army. Right? Now come to Kargil. The same projection to their public. Mercifully, the uniformed services in Pakistan, including the army, admits it. In even their private conversations and even public conversations with us, admitted that it was disaster. I still call the Pakistan army the world's best conflict initiators, but they are the world's worst conflict terminators. They don't have any idea how to terminate a conflict. And that's exactly what happened in Kargil. The United States had to step in ultimately to vacate the heights, force Pakistan to vacate the heights, and that's how it happened. It was an embarrassment, a political and a military embarrassment for Pakistan and its Pakistan army. By virtue of the fact that because Pakistan army Musharraf came to power within 4 months of Kargil ending, you found that there was no further investigation into it, etc. Nawaz Sharif, if he had stayed on, perhaps we may have had a different narrative on the post-Kargil situation as far as the Pakistan army was concerned.
So on that question, let us come back to the Indian question of how rational, acceptable that you find the Indian narrative on Surgical Strike 1 and Surgical Strike 2. Logically speaking, if the Surgical Strike 1 had been successful, there were no reason for the second one. So the question therefore is that, is Indian narrative on both surgical strikes, including I am counting the
Balakot and surgical strike.
Balakot and the surgical strike. Is it convincing for an international audience? And do you think those strikes and India's new posture will actually stop cross-border terrorism, which is an objective of the strikes?
Let me respond to that first, and Christine can probably give a unbiased opinion. Mine may be a biased opinion, slightly. I belong to the Indian Armed Forces, I belong to the Indian Army. I have no reason to disbelieve my Air Force, and I have no reason to disbelieve my Army. I do remember that immediately after the surgical strikes, I was called by General Suhag, who was my own course mate, and requested that I need to be upfront in the handling of the media thereafter, so that the information part of it can be handled correctly. My only regret on Surgical Strike 1 was that my first demand was, I need some visuals. I need a visual to put out, and I need a visual to describe. Somehow, we couldn't get the visuals. The same thing happened with Surgical Strike 2 with Balakot. Perhaps technology has not aided us sufficiently, number one. Or number two, the information domain has not been considered sufficiently important enough for the Indian Armed Forces. That's my only regret. Having done spectacular actions, if the information domain is not exploited, then you have achieved only half your intention and your aim.
What's your take, Chris? Did India shoot down an F-16?
It didn't, and I can say that with absolute certitude. It just didn't, and it's not because I'm an F-16 enthusiast. I have very vocally said that India should make F-16s here. It should be part of a global supply chain. There's no military. There's no global military in the world that does not export weapons. There's no global power in the world that doesn't have a military-industrial complex. And by producing F-16s overnight, India does this. Doesn't mean they have to fly F-16s, but making them would create jobs. I mean, look, we're here in Bangalore. How many jobs does HAL create, right? So we can have, these are different aspects of the F-16 issue, none of which impinge upon the fact that no, India did not shoot one down. But the other thing I'd like to point out is that there weren't 2 surgical strikes. There, by a colleague's count of mine in the UK, about 17 surgical strikes. What distinguished the other 17 surgical strikes from the 2 that you know about is that you know about them. And the problem with you knowing about them is that we never actually know about them, right? And I say this as an American, when I'm very accustomed to a politicized military who has to say things on TV, who has to reassure Americans because we're voters and we have to support a party that's in power, right? So unfortunately, when you have these kinds of raids, I've become so cynical of my own government that I don't believe what we heard about the al-Baghdadi raid. And what I want you to know, surgical strikes don't end this problem.
Okay,
right?
so
They don't. Well, I just want to make this point. It's really important. You are mowing the grass. We mow the grass because we need to mow the grass.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So we have 7 minutes. I think I will have 2 questions and we'll open the floor for at least 4 minutes of questions. So in India-Pakistan narrative, that is what we are coming to towards a conclusion. Hindutva politics in India, so sort of define India's strategic interest in terms of a civilizational conflict. They speak about 1200 years of conflict, which actually began in the 8th century when Muhammad bin Qasim reached Sindh. So is India-Pakistan problem actually a narrative of Hindu-Muslim conflict, General Hassan?
No, I won't view it so narrowly. I would also say that yes, if Kashmir was resolved, India and Pakistan may still have been at war. If Siachen had been resolved, Kashmir had been resolved, the waters issue had been resolved. There are many issues. There are many issues between India and Pakistan just other than religion. It's a question of coexistence. Somehow the historical narratives which are played against each other and the baggage of history plays continuously today. In the social media, for example, the kind of enmity which is displayed by the public, of absolutely ill-informed public on both sides of the divide, it will not allow us to come to peace. It's not really a civilizational divide. I would call it a historical baggage and some issues which remain potential triggers, like water wars. Pakistan is extremely worried all the time that resolving anything with Kashmir, with India means, first of all, that water control of waters must not remain in the hands of India. That has nothing to do with civilizations.
Okay, Chris, I'll frame the same question slightly differently for you. So has India made Pakistan the defining piece of its own self-identity and self-existence? And people like you have spoken about Pakistan as a reckless, adventurous state, a jelly state. Do you think India is in the danger of moving toward in that spectrum where India is viewed as reckless or adventurous by the international community?
Right, so I mean, that's a different question than I think. That is, after today, I'd rather not answer a question like that, right? Because today is an interesting day. We'll have to see what happens as days and weeks pass. But I think this question of why Pakistan does what it does is really quite interesting, right? What Nehru doesn't get enough credit. As independence neared, Nehru looked at what happened to other post-colonial states, and he was making very active efforts to coup-proof this
So, Chris,
country.
I think, Larinda, because we have to take
No,
questions
I
because
just want
we have to
this-
30
go
seconds.
back to
30
the
seconds.
general's
Yes.
point. So,
We have only 4 minutes.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
going to take 2 questions.
but so Nehru.
No, let me moderate, sir, please.
So Nehru made a bunch of really profound changes in the Indian, what would be the Indian Army, even before independence, right? And we know that Jinnah didn't even think about this. So going to the general's point, we could ask, had Jinnah thought about coup-proofing Pakistan, would we have this entrenched entity? Had the two-nation theory been on ethnic terms instead of religion, we could still see conflict, but the axis wouldn't be communal. So given the way Pakistan has shaped over the years, and it's largely driven by the Pakistan's equities, I will say to you with as much certainty as I can muster, you could give Pakistan all of Kashmir, but the Pakistan army cannot be satisfied, right?
Fair. All right, okay, so we have 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Anybody has a question? So, here, somebody right there. Can we have
You
a
can
mic?
have your hand raised and we'll have our volunteer bring out the mic. You will decide whose questions you want to take.
So if we can have 2-3 questions together, very briefly.
My question is two-part. First is regarding the constant violation of ceasefire agreements with Pakistan. will that qualify as limited war, and is there a solution to it?
Yes.
And the second part is denuclearization of Pakistan. Is it possible? Second, desirable.
Demilitarization.
Denuclearization, sir.
Denuclearization. One more question, then they will take. One more question.
Yeah, first of all, it's really assuring for all of us to understand, and the limited part of it is really not limited, it's big. Being a citizen staying in India, it's very, very reassuring. The question is, we talked about India and Pakistan, about the nuclear narrative, right? So, do you think that China does play a role here? And what do you, when we say China, right, the word China, and we talk about nuclear empowerment, how does it fare up?
Yeah, denuclearization and ceasefire in Pakistan.
I will speak on the first part of it, the first question. The aspect of the line of control and whether infringement of the ceasefire violations from time to time actually can be defined as a part of limited war. Yes, very much so. Actually saying the situation in Jammu and Kashmir is limited war. And it's limited war in the terms of its hybridity. And the line of control is one of the domains of hybrid war. Whenever Kashmir is silent, there is stabilization in Kashmir. If the government of India, the Indian armed forces have achieved stabilization, the one place where Pakistan can always play pranks with us is the line of control. To remind the world that there is an issue between India and Pakistan on Kashmir, and there is a nuclear angle attached to it. Your second question on the aspect of denuclearizing Pakistan. The biggest fear of the United States and many other Western countries is the possibility of Pakistan imploding and the nuclear weapons falling in the hands of non-state actors. That is the ultimate specter of threats that they look at. I don't think Pakistan, 200 million people, 650,000 army, 140 nuclear weapons or nuclear warheads with them, unless the world wants to get together and do it, which is even going to be even more difficult. I don't think we are looking at a situation where you can denuclearize Pakistan today. Don't ever try and think that Pakistan is an insignificant country.
So
strategically one of the most important countries.
Thank you, General. And Chris, the last word is yours. The role of China.
But very brief on this issue of denuclearization.
40 seconds.
I know, I see it. As an American, it's very frustrating that Pakistan's nuclear weapons program has grown massively on my time and on my dime. And it's important understanding that Pakistan not only uses these nuclear weapons to blackmail India, but it's also why the United States will never put Pakistan under significant sanctions. It will never get off the gray list and go to the black list, because that will inevitably trigger an IMF cutoff, and everyone is genuinely afraid that if Pakistan collapses, this scenario that you identified will fructify. But our money has made those realities all the more likely. Turning very quickly to China, the answer is yes, right? China wants to keep India in a box where India is constantly focusing upon Pakistan with respect to Pakistan. China has every interest in giving Pakistan the moxie to take a punga with India, short of taking a war. Because once a war starts, it reveals its hand that it's not going to do anything for Pakistan.
Thank you. Thank you.